Welcome to the Phillies special. A bunch of guys who just like to talk about Philadelphia sports. Today's podcast is brought to you by Toys R Us. I'm a Toys R Us kid. Now, for today's slate, we are going to tackle the Philadelphia Phillies. We have a full panel today for you guys, jam-packed with our best podcast announcers.
Best
we have, and the best talent, that's right. We have Kyle Walney, Joel Robinson, and Alan Hirsch. And of course, my name is Ben Lawson. I'll be mediating today. Our producer, Jason Hernandez, is not available at the moment, but that's okay, because we're still going to roll out this podcast for you. All right, so Joel, why don't you tell us the topic for today?
All right, so today we're going to be covering Phillies baseball and what they need to do in the off-season so they can improve and make the playoffs next year, maybe even win a World Series. So we're going to look at a checklist of what they need to get done.
You really think the Phillies can win the World Series next year?
Yeah, we're going to add that one to the early 2019 bold predictions category.
Really?
It's
a hot take right there.
If they get into the playoffs, there's always a shot. You never know. It's just some hopeful thoughts there.
Sure.
Well, I mean,
So,
I guess.
so the Phillies in the offseason, they aren't really losing anything worthy of note. So they just need to make a few acquisitions. And like we said in the last podcast, their offense was really weak. And specifically, their outfield and the left side of the infield. Their outfield had a negative 6.8 wins above average last year. Shortstop was negative 3.3, and third base was negative 2.4, all in the bottom three of the MLB.
I hear you, Joel. Real quick, just for all the viewers, and by viewers I mean listeners, of course. Can you help us explain what a wins above average is and how that's calculated? Or if you want us to look it up real quick while you keep going, we'll get that for you.
So wins above average is just a statistic that shows it compares all the players in the league at certain positions and compares them. And so it's really just, if you're in the negatives, that's really bad, obviously. You want to have a really high wins above average. So that means that you're excelling at your position, helping your team to win more games.
Basically means you're above average.
Yeah,
If you're over zero, you're above average.
Yeah. So to make the playoffs, a team usually needs to win 90 or more games. And so Phillies are going to have to buy some wins over the offseason, especially at, like I said, the outfield and the left side of the infield. So first, we're going to look at the minor leagues, I think, right, guys?
Yeah, we're going to look at the minor leagues a little bit. Every single team, what you got to do is you got to start with your farm system. You got to, get a little bit of a base going with the farm system, start to show some success. That's when you start to attract the big-name free agents, add a couple bats, add a couple pitchers, maybe a starter, maybe a bullpen guy. Now you got yourself a roster. But, you can't do it all through free agency unless you're the Yankees or the Dodgers. If you're another team, and pretty much any other team, especially the middle market, small market teams, start in the minor leagues. That's when you attract the big-name free agents. Once you're young and cheap guys start to play well, and then you got yourself a little bit of a window to win games.
All right, so I think first we're going to look at the outfield. So in the outfield last year, you had Nick Williams, who had a negative 1.1 WAR, and Aaron Altair, negative 0.8 WAR. So really, looking at WAR, they're just hurting the team. They're not helping them to win more games, which is what they need. Two outfielders that I really like played a lot of time at the high A level in Clearwater for the Phillies. You've got Adam Hasseley, who came out of Virginia, and he's just 23. He came out of the first round in 2017. His on-base percentage was .360. He's ranked 4th in the Phillies minor league system, but first out of all the outfielders, second out of the position players. And he's just got a really solid bat. His scouting grade is an overall 55, hitting 55, power's down at 45. I think he could be of use, but they don't have him predicted to come up until 2020, so another year or so, but if they really need him, they might bring him up. Another player who played along with Hasseley in the minors last year is Mickey Moniak. He's really young at 21, so he needs a lot more experience here, but on-base percentage over 300. He's 6th in the minor league system for the Phillies. Second best outfielder according to the MLB pipeline ratings. So I think those could be two options, but like I said, they're both really young, need a little bit more experience before being called up.
Yeah, so I don't know if those are guys that they're necessarily going to be able to rely on for outfield production, this early in their career. So I think that unless they're willing to wait a couple more years, which I don't think that they should be, considering they've got some guys that are, right now in the, peak of their careers, really right there in their prime. So I think that they got to just go win now mode. They're spending a decent amount of money, so those might have to be positions, in the outfield. That might have to be a position that they kind of supplement in free agency. I don't know if the outfield's looking too good from a minor league perspective. Even, Adam Hasseley, who's ranked 4th, that's their top-ranked outfielder, doesn't hit for a whole lot of power. And as we've already mentioned in the previous podcast, this is a team that just was not hitting for enough power last year, and they weren't scoring enough runs, and that was really their Achilles heel. So I think it might be worth it to look for maybe a power hitting outfielder in free agency.
Well, as far as those power hitting outfielders go, there's one name that really stands out at the top of this year's free agent class, and that's Bryce Harper. And there's been some rumored interest in Philadelphia from Harper. Of course, his ex-teammate Jason Worth played for the Phillies, but that would be a very big signing for Philadelphia. But even if they can't sign a guy like Harper, if Harper wants to go somewhere else, there are plenty of other opportunities for them to get good bats in the outfield. A couple guys that stand out to me: Andrew McCutchen, Carlos Gonzalez, and Michael Brantley. None of those guys are, except for maybe Gonzalez, are overly powerful, but those are 3 impact bats that will really help the Phillies next year.
Yeah, I really think Michael Brantley would be a really good fit for the Phillies because I think they could get him for not quite as expensive as someone like a Bryce Harper, but still get a lot of production. His numbers have been up the past few years. After that one year he had an injury that didn't get really a whole lot of playing time, but since then his numbers have been up a lot. I think he can add 2 to 3 wins to the team. His OPS plus was at 114, so that's well above average. I think he'd be a great fit for the Phillies. Another one you didn't mention that I really like is A.J. Pollock. His numbers have been up. He's a consistent bat. He's kind of the same caliber player as Michael Brantley. Not too expensive, but still a solid player. And then Bryce Harper, the big name out there, he can add a lot to the Phillies' offense, really help out. He's kind of expensive, though, but we'll see if they can afford him and what other teams go after him in the offseason.
Yeah. Plus, admittedly, Carlos Gonzalez, it's hard to see him leaving Colorado. And, yeah, even after Bryce Harper's down year this past year, as far as the average goes, he's going to be very expensive, and a team's going to have to give up a lot to get Harper. So that may be a guy that the Phillies might even want to stay away from and try to go for a less expensive impact bat.
And another outfielder for the Phillies who's been giving them pretty solid production in left field, a man by the name of Rhys Hoskins. He's 25 years old, still in playing in a good spot in his career. In 2017, he had a really. You mentioned some power hitters out in the outfield. I mean, he had a .618 slugging percentage in 2017, which is nothing to really bat an eye at. And then in 2018, he really amped up his power hitting. He has 36 doubles this year and 33 home runs, 94 RBIs. So he's really been able to get some power behind the ball and get some distance on it, and has become more of a staple for the Phillies, especially as a power hitter in the outfield, like you guys have mentioned. But I mean, it definitely would not hurt for them to get another reliable guy like Rice.
Yeah, I too enjoy a good bowl of rice.
Yeah, that's what I said. Rhys Hoskins.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was definitely one of their better sticks this year. But if you want to go back to the prospect rankings, really the only guy that shows up towards the top there that you could even consider maybe almost major league ready in terms of infielders is Alec Bohm. He's one of those guys that's up there in their prospect rankings as an infielder, and they definitely got below average production from some infield positions last year. For example, shortstop, second base. Those are positions where they just did not produce nearly as well as they should have. So he could be a possible solution, but at the same time, like we said, lots of free agent names out there. It's always worth throwing some money at some guys. Seeing what sticks, seeing which guys you can land, because I feel like you can definitely trust a experienced veteran guy, bringing him in as a free agent to take shortstop or second base as opposed to a unproven guy like Alec Bohm.
Yeah, I really, really like Alec Bohm. Just coming out of the first round of last draft, Wichita State University. He's got a lot of upside and potential. Second in the Phillies system. Fourth out of all the third base prospects, 45 out of all prospects for that matter. So he's got a lot of potential, but he's got a few more years to develop in the minors before they can bring him up. So the Phillies are probably going to have to look at some other names for infielders to try to pick up to help them win some more games.
Yeah, again, there's that big name that you look at when it comes to the infield. Well, there's actually a couple big names, but the real big name that has also been linked to Philadelphia somewhat this coming off season is Manny Machado, another guy who's going to command a lot of money from whichever team signs him. And the Phillies, it's an option, but the Phillies might want to look at some other guys that are a bit more cheap and provide them that defense that we said that they need in the last podcast, if you remember. And two guys that I'm looking at here who are cheap players, impactful. One of them more than the other because, well, the two guys I'm looking at are Jose Iglesias and Adeiny Echeverria. And Iglesias to me stands out more because while he's an excellent fielder, he also has a solid bat. And he hits for pretty high average consistently. But Echeverria, he is a very good fielder, an outstanding fielder, and he doesn't hit for low averages, but it's just not as impactful as I would imagine Jose Iglesias being. Another guy that stands out, I'm not actually sure how good he is on defense, but they could be having a reunion with Freddie Galvis this coming off season. So that's another definitely impact bat that I think would help them like he did just last year.
Yeah, I think Freddie Galvis is an option, but then again, he did only have an OPS plus of 79, and so that could be an interesting thing to see if they go after Freddie Galvis again. And there are a lot of other players that could be options too. One One you didn't mention that's a big name is Josh Donaldson. He another big expensive name, a lot of production, OPS plus 137, wins above average 25.3, WAR 38.1. Really nice player, but also, like you said, kind of expensive, just like Manny Machado would be.
Yeah. I want to talk real quick about another position that we kind of went over in the last podcast that the Phillies could use, and it kind of went under the radar because we were talking about how good their pitching really is. But one problem that the Phillies have faced this year and in past few years is their lack of a definitive closer. And hitting the market this year are a few very solid closer options that the Phillies could take a look at. Again, big names such as Craig Kimbrell or Cody Allen, and then a few more very good closers that you don't hear as much about in Kelvin Herrera and Urias Familia. But then there's also Bud Norris and Sergio Romo, who are two other good options, just for the Phillies to get that definitive closer in there. And Kimbrell will probably be very expensive. Looking at him as maybe one of the top paid relief pitchers of all time. But I would say Kelvin Herrera or Juris Familia would be a very solid option for the Phillies to sign.
Yeah, they definitely need help. Like he said, the lack of a definitive closer. I think they really just need bullpen help in general. Bullpen ranking overall 18th in the MLB, bullpen ERA, batting average against the bullpen 248. Not exactly where you want it to be. They're going to need a little bit more dominance out of that pen. Try and get it up near maybe the top 10 in the league. I think that would do it for them. And like he said, lots of big names out there. Zach Britton, David Robertson, Cody Allen, Craig Kimbrell, Andrew Miller, Kelvin Herrera. These are all, game-changing guys right there. So if they can just go out and get, one or two of these guys, I think that it's going to do, wonders for that bullpen. Even if they get, a little bit of help from any of the guys that they call up from the AAA team next year. Even if they just get a little bit of help from some of those guys, I think that bringing in a couple of free agent relief pitchers, closers, either one, I think that it would help them big time.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta. Looking at the top, some of the top relief pitchers. I believe Cody Allen, he'll be hitting the market. Kimbrell will be hitting the market. He'll price himself out of Boston. Miller probably, Herrera probably, and then it comes to the two Yankees guys, Britton and Robertson. Looking at them, I think the Yankees will probably make a move to re-sign one of them. If looking at it from my perspective, the one with the better chance of being re-signed by New York is David Robertson. Zach Britton just seems like a bigger name, a bit more expensive. But there is a possibility that neither of them get re-signed. So those are very solid options all around for Philadelphia this offseason.
Yeah, and when we talk about them going out and getting some of these free agents, going out and picking some guys up, it's not far-fetched to talk about them going out and grabbing a couple of guys because they have the money to do it, so they can throw some money at a couple of different guys, and they can really go out there and they can make a couple of big splashes. A lot of teams are relegated to making, one or two signings in the offseason, but really Philadelphia, if they want to, they can go out there and they can get a couple of guys. They're 23rd in the league right now in total team payroll at $104 million. That right there is $34 million below the league average, and $34 million right there, I mean, that's what Miguel Cabrera is making in a season right now. So, you figure big name free agent, you can go out there and you can get two of them for that money, and, then you're right up there at league average. They are currently, they're $124 million below the Boston Red Sox, who are the, tops in the league in total payroll. So they've definitely got the money. They can definitely go out there, spend a little bit, and try and make some splashes, try and sign some big name guys, especially in the bullpen. maybe some power bats, a little bit of help on the infield, especially defensively. A guy like Jose Iglesias would, do a big help. He'd be a big help for that team right there that struggled so mightily last year in defense. Like we said, defense was their Achilles heel. So, getting a guy like Jose Iglesias, getting a couple pitchers, some relief pitchers, a definitive closer, a guy like Juris Familiar, Kelvin Herrera, and you've got yourself a team next year, and they've certainly got the money to do it.
All right, I like those. I like that at the end there, Kyle. So guys, we got just a minute or so here left. Does anyone have any closing remarks or anything to kind of wrap things up before we have to get going here for this podcast?
Yeah, two guys we didn't mention earlier that I think could be like really under the radar. You could get them for cheap, like Kyle, you said, getting like multiple players. Is Mark Reynolds. He can be good use in the infield. I feel like he's kind of an underrated player. He's OPS plus last year is 112. He has experience at third base and first base. He's been used in the outfield before too, so kind of sort of a utility guy there.
Good power bat there.
And then a good power bat too, yeah. And then you got Lennius Martin, who he hasn't played a lot the last 2 years, so not really sure how he will help with the production. Is kind of a little bit unpredictable, but he could be really cheap and could help out as he's been productive in the past.
All right. So there you have it. Wrapping up our last podcast for this last week of September here. Stay tuned maybe later for one more Philly special to come at you. Who knows? But also, Reese Hoskins, if you're out there listening, I apologize. I just had a Chipotle bowl before this podcast, so I had some rice on my mind. So other than that, we're going to go ahead and call it quits here tonight in the studio, and we will catch you guys next time on the Philly special.